collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, we discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with the Palestine National Authority's former Minister of Information, Nabeel Shaath.
You wouldn't believe it, but the Israelis today take 92% of our water and give it to their settlers, whereas the 4.5 million Palestinians get 8% of the water produced in our land.
Hear about the Pharos International Chamber Music Festival.
The venues are very special. In fact, BBC Music Magazine mentions them, that year after year the venues attract some of the world's finest musicians to Cyprus.
And dialogues with Picasso.
Because Picasso, he lives people, he loves people, he do anything for people.
Nabeel Shaath, the former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Information for the Palestine National Authority, was in Cyprus this week. I spoke to him about his work with the Israeli-Palestinian peace process and his reasons for coming to Cyprus. What actually are you doing in Cyprus at the moment?
Cyprus is an old friend. I've come to Cyprus when I was 10 years old. Long time ago, and I've come to Cyprus several times. I was the Foreign Minister of Palestine, Deputy Prime Minister of Palestine, and part of it was at the time that Mr. Klaudios was also the Foreign Minister at that time.
So you're meeting old friends?
Very much so, a real good friend. But we have also many other friends with all the parties, with Akil and with EDEC and with the Democratic Party, and we have friends here for over a long time. I have many students here. I was the Dean of the School of Management at the American University in Beirut at one time, so I have many students who are Cypriot and who are here. And therefore, I'm coming to a friendly country with friendly people, with a joint history of struggling against British occupation at one time and against other types of occupations from in our country, the Israeli occupation. And therefore, our quest for liberation, for independence, for unity was really a shared quest. We supported each other all the time.
But Cyprus has got very friendly with Israel since the discovery of the hydrocarbons. How far has that changed your ability to count on their friendship and support for the Palestinian cause?
But that's what I'm trying to really find out with this trip. I was invited officially by Mr. Klaudios and by the President Anastasiadis. So I'm the guest of your government, really, here. And I'm coming as an envoy of our President, Abu Mazen, but also I'm the Foreign Relations Commissioner of the Fatah Party, the leading party. And so I immediately accepted the invitation because I really wanted to see for myself. We don't mind at all that Cyprus builds good relations, economic relations and so on with the Israelis as with the Russians or with the Americans for that matter. Question is that we should not be made to pay the price of that rapprochement, that our right as a people who are under occupation and under exploitation and under the threat of colonial settlement in every part of our country, I needed to know that Cyprus remains committed to that did not sell that out in order to get better economic relations with the Israelis. And I'm getting assurances everywhere I go, starting with the President, to the Speaker of the Parliament and President of the Parliament, and the Foreign Minister, presidents of different parties. I'm really getting very believable, very friendly, very intimate assurances that is not the case, that their economic relations with the Israelis and their rapprochement with the Israelis is not something that we have to pay the price of, that they remain committed to the rights of the Palestinians to liberate their land, to build their independent state, to have rights, that they are still committed to really protest and help us stop the colonial settlement movement of the Israelis on our land. None of that has changed, and that they're willing to show this in a varieties of ways. Programs of cultural exchange, economic relations, and political commitment in the European Union and the international organizations and everywhere. And I also told them, all the countries we have relations with and who are very close to us have relations with Israel. I mean, Sweden has relations with Israel, Russia has relations, China, India.
So
Britain,
you're not asking
France.
for, as no country can, of course, in the modern globalised world, for, in a sense, preferential treatment, because you know that everybody has to talk to everybody else. But if we come to the talks over the years that the Palestinians have had with the Israelis, and particularly the Oslo Accord, because I think you were partly responsible
Partly
in the I didn't want to say partly to blame, but you were partly responsible, certainly, for drawing that up. Now, the breakthrough, as I understand it, was achieved by separating the interim settlement from the final settlement. Until then, Palestinians had always said, no, we have to have the final settlement. But at Oslo, you agreed to go along with the Israeli stance that the two should be separated. So you signed something that, in effect, meant that you'd agreed to something, whereas the Israelis had no clear commitment on permanent settlement. Was that a mistake?
That's not the mistake. We committed many mistakes. I will talk about some of them. But we did not give up the permanent settlement for the interim settlement. We accepted a package in which the interim leads invariably and almost automatically into the permanent.
So why didn't it?
Okay. Why didn't it? The Israelis, of course, had to accept that package at a time when they really could not say no. It was a time where the world was changing. The Soviet Union went out of business. The Arabs fought with the Americans against an Arab country, Iraq, and the American campaign there succeeded. And therefore, the Americans emerged from 1991, that's the year we started the negotiations, as the supreme owners of the universe. Okay? And when they said they were willing to take that agreement and implement it, we could not say no. That agreement was made really in Oslo and signed in Washington. But it was really just a continuation of an effort that the United States had started with the Madrid conference in 1991. And therefore, eventually, it was the product of the Americans.
But was it ever going to work if there was no comeback on either of the sides if they didn't stick to their side of the agreement?
Okay, but that's really precisely the mistake of the Americans. I mean, the Americans promised that they will make sure that the two parties implement each their own commitments. But they never did. They put always the pressure on us, with very, very little pressure. Sometimes they put some pressure on the Israelis, but they didn't do anything to the continuing colonial settlement that really robbed our land and our water for free for the Israelis. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything about the lack of respect by the Israelis of the conditions of the agreement, particularly the timing of the agreements. We should have finished everything in 5 years. We should have finished the interim period in 2 years. We could have started actually the permanent with the interim as the agreement permitted, but the Americans said, why don't you give yourself a chance to test the Israelis, and told the Israelis, why don't you have a chance to test the Palestinians? So start with 2 years of interimness and then move into the permanent negotiations.
But it's really vital.
But then things change. You see, this is the problem. As we went along, when the United States found itself to be really and truly the sole owner of the universe, and the Israelis recognized that, it was much easier for the Israelis to gain American support for us to do the same.
But Israel is a past master at gaining support in important countries. How far does the Palestinian Authority and do the Palestinians as a whole believe that they need to up their game in terms of the public relations, the public opinion?
We have made lots of success in the last 2-3 years in that regard, in particular. I mean, the fact that now 139 countries recognize Palestine as an independent state, with East Jerusalem its capital, on the borders of 1967, is really a progress that really it would have been very difficult to have seen 20 years ago.
Sure, but forgive me, there's no sign of that state actually coming about in real terms, and the settlement building goes on unabated, with a few slaps on the wrist possibly from the American president saying, oh, please stop doing that, it doesn't help, but little else.
I agree with you, but I was responding to the question about our public relations ability to gain friends. The question is not only that. We have been able to gain lots of friends, but what you're saying, these friends have not yet been able to translate their friendship into action on the ground to force the Israelis out of their colonial practices.
Do you think they will be able to do that at some point?
I think so. The only other alternative is to go back to violence, and we don't want to go back to violence.
Well, we have, to a certain degree, already gone back to violence, haven't we? I mean, what are your thoughts
on the Israelis
current...
never stopped using violence.
No, sure. But what are your thoughts on this current upsurge in individual stabbings of Israelis and the, I think most people would say, disproportionate response from the IDF?
Absolutely.
And how on earth do you calm things down?
Look, the Israelis call their violence security and our violence terrorism. That is, if we really in any way fight back by knives or by guns or whatever, even if we fight back by going to the United Nations to complain about them, this is terrorism. But if they kill 4,500 Palestinians in Gaza and destroy half the homes of Gaza, that's a necessity of security. They are just obtaining security by doing that. But this misuse of language through euphemisms like this, it has really stopped being very effective in the world opinion. The world understands more, but your question is not about the world understanding us, understanding our rights. You're really asking the crucial question of when does that understanding turn into action to put pressure on Israel not to do so? I mean, the Russians occupied the Ukraines, okay, or parts of the Ukraine, encouraged problems inside the Ukraines. So immediately Europe and America started serious actions and sanctions against the Russian Union. They don't do that to Israel. Iran was suspected of starting to build an atomic bomb before the negotiations ended. So the whole world put pressures worth $240 billion on the Iranians, which helped very much put pressure on the Iranians to go to the agreement to stop building a nuclear bomb. But they wouldn't do that to Israel.
Well, Israel doesn't even admit that it's already got one, does it? And we all know it has.
Got 200 of them, 200 bombs they have. They are the fourth largest nuclear power in the world, and the third largest air force in the world, and their per capita income is 40 times the per capita income of the Palestinians.
Now, that's something else I wanted to talk to you about, because way back when you were in charge, I think, actually, of the economy of the Palestinian areas.
I was a planning minister at one time.
And at the beginning there was huge growth. Things were going very nicely.
Correct.
Now, I obviously understand that in Gaza in particular, you're not going to get growth because you haven't any longer got the infrastructure there. But what, if anything, can the Palestinian Authority do about trying to improve the economic lot of the Palestinians?
Today it's very difficult because the Israelis have already taken most of the land and the water anyway, our resources. And they stopped us from using the gas that we found in the shores of Gaza. And therefore, I mean, you wouldn't believe it, but the Israelis today take 92% of our water and give it to their settlers, whereas the 4.5 million Palestinians get 8% of the water produced in our land. Therefore, we hardly can make the deserts bloom, as the Israelis used to say. The Israelis have taken control now of 62% of the West Bank. And that is the heart of the West Bank and the River Jordan Valley of the West Bank. We really only have today the area of our cities and big towns We don't have much agricultural land or water, have been taken all by the Israelis. So the question is really, how do you really build an economy when somebody is taking your land, is taking your water, is taking your minerals, is controlling all your borders, is forcing you to import only from him, levying all kinds of penalties and sanctions against you when you do anything that doesn't please him? We are subjugated to Israeli military control to make economic gains for the Israelis. I mean, it's very difficult today to see how can we escape that without getting rid of the occupation first and gaining some measure of independence that will allow us to start building our economy. In 1994, it was different. In 1994, the world then was really quite willing to put pressure on the Israelis to give us a chance to build that independent Palestinian state. I remind you, the Israelis did not want to go to the Madrid conference, and the Americans stopped paying them $10 billion in loan guarantees to force them to go to the Madrid conference. And therefore, when we started the authority, we got a lot of aid from the Americans and a lot of aid from the Europeans. I was the minister in charge. I signed an agreement of associate membership to the EU only in 3 months and 2 days, which was phenomenal. No country in the world was able to negotiate itself as an associate member of the EU in 3 months. It took Egypt 16 years. I got a free trade agreement with the United States and Canada. So there was a willingness of the international community to help Palestine to really get started. And we had an Israeli government that also believed that it had to do this for the interest of the Israelis themselves, to produce peace and eventually economic relations with all the Arabs via its agreement with the Palestinians. There was somebody called Ishaq Rabin who really believed that this is the time to make peace with the Palestinians. The Ishaq Rabin era went out. You have now a government that believes that all of this land is theirs and they have to really make a Jewish homeland on our land, and that the history gives them the right to do so all over the West Bank. And you really have an international community that may find our case to be, to make them sympathetic, but they're not yet ready to put the kind of pressure that has been put on Iran or on Russia or on other countries in order to get the Israelis to be in peace and in real security and in real prosperity.
And you can hear the remainder of my chat with Nabeel Shaath on next week's Cyprus News Digest.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Next Thursday, the 19th of May, sees the start of the 16th International Pharos Chamber Music Festival. It's taking place at the Shoe Factory in Nicosia and at the Royal Manor House in Kouklia, near Paphos. Joining us to give us the lowdown is Garo Keheyan. Garo, two very popular venues, and it's now an established fact, isn't it, that you use these extensively for the Chamber Music Festival. How did you first come to select particularly the Manor House in Kouklia, which is such a beautiful venue and has, I think, been part of the reason that people travel from abroad to come here and enjoy not just the music, but the venue?
You're absolutely right. The venues are very special. In fact, BBC Music Magazine mentions them, that year after year the venues attract some of the world's finest musicians to Cyprus. But I think it's more than the venues. We do also attract some of the world's greatest musicians, and we have, this year is no exception, we have an extraordinary lineup of 20 great musicians from all over the world. And in that lineup, of course, we have this year Wu Jia Wang, who is really a huge star, a celebrity pianist who is gracing the world's greatest concert halls. So in addition to these wonderful venues, the Shoe Factory and Kouklia, the festival is attracting visitors from abroad more and more. We have regulars who come every year. I think we have one couple from the UK who've been coming for the last 10 years and bringing friends. Sometimes I come across people at the festival who say, we've come here, we're in Europe. Of course, they didn't come specially over from New Zealand, but they heard about the festival in New Zealand, and they happen to be in Europe, and they say, well, why don't we, come to Cyprus and take advantage of hearing some of these great musicians. Cyprus itself, as you know, is an attractive tourist destination. So I think the festival, has become an important asset in the effort in Cyprus to create cultural tourism.
And the venues we've mentioned, but you talk about 20 really high-class musicians. Do tell us a little bit as well about them, and a pianist who I think has been billed as one of the world's great upcoming talents.
Yes, as I mentioned, Wu Jia Wang will be joining us this year as well, but we also have many regulars. Yevgeny Sudbin, another extraordinary pianist, will be with us. We have a very strong group of violinists. Dashin Kashimoto, again another regular, who is the concertmaster of the Berlin Philharmonic. Boris Brovstein, an extraordinary violinist. And of course our regulars, Levon Chilingirian. And I should mention there's another very, very talented violinist who's going to open the festival this year in the Shoe Factory venue, and that is Emmanuel Chiknavorian, who is only 19 and this year won the second prize of the Sibelius violin competition. He actually won the jury prize or the audience prize for the best version of the Sibelius violin concerto. So I think he will emerge again in that top group of the world's greatest violinists.
We're talking actually in the Shoe Factory itself, and the piano's here, but the rest of it looks just like a rather lovely home. For people who haven't been here, can you explain this venue and how you set it up for these concerts? Because I think the essence is the intimacy, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. I really think so much of these great artists perform in huge spaces, auditoriums which seat 2,000 people sometimes, and you need a pair of binoculars often to see the artist and the piano. These are commercially driven, of course. This has to be commercially driven. But previously, in previous centuries, chamber music was performed in much more in smaller and much more intimate spaces.
And is that why it's called chamber music?
Absolutely,
I imagine.
of course, yes, absolutely. And what happened was that I was walking in this neighborhood right on the Green Line, on the border that divides our beautiful city, and I saw this building for sale. It was an old shoe factory, hence the name. The whole area was a war zone. As you know, it's being gentrified now, and there are other cultural foundations who are also on this street. And it's become quite a pleasant venue. But the shoe factory itself can accommodate up to, depending on the configuration, but up to 200 people. So it's not that small, but it's got a wonderful acoustic. We have a first-class Steinway concert grand in the venue. And the musicians who come here, they absolutely adore the space, the intimacy, the acoustics, and the piano as well. So I think it's been a huge success. Over the last 8 years, we've organized more than 150 concerts in this venue, and it's become, I think it's contributed to the regeneration of old Nicosia, and also it has actually sort of put Nicosia on the international cultural map as well, because many, many artists throughout the world have performed here and talk about the shoe factory when they're traveling and among their friends, and so I think it's a great plus for Nicosia and for Cyprus.
And if we can just sort of paint a picture, because as I look around, on the left there's the piano, then there are a few low sofas and things in the corners, a huge fireplace, and then over on my right here, shelves just lined with CDs and books. It's a home. That's what's different about it, Garo, isn't it? It isn't a concert venue, actually. People feel that you're welcoming them into your space where they will hear some fantastic music.
That's true, but I would you called it a home, and I would call it a home for the arts. and I would call it the home of the foundation. We have a capacity to seat up to 200 people, but there's a great flexibility as well, depending on what we do. We have film screenings here, we have lectures here, and of course the music. We've even had dance performance. But the beauty of the space is, as you say, its flexibility, because, sometimes we might have an audience of 50 people for a lecture, and then it can expand for a very popular sold-out concert up to 200 people. And the other advantage of the venue is we have a guest room upstairs, so musicians can stay here if it's one or two people. And the venue is a very flexible space, because after concerts we often host receptions for the artists, for friends and sponsors. And some of our collaborators, which are often embassies, can host a reception afterwards. And, we can even cater for a dinner for the artist.
So it is a little bit of a different idea, a different approach to the music. What about the people who come to the concerts? You mentioned people coming from abroad for years and years, but it's also garnered a very big audience right here in Cyprus, and not just in Nicosia, because of the fact that you've used other venues like Kuklia.
Yes, well, Kuklia is, as you know, in the Pharos area. And we have a wonderful, very loyal audience in Kuklia, mostly foreigners, I would say, or local residents, but people expats, or I don't know what the correct term is today, people who've chosen to live in Cyprus. And every year we see a slightly larger number of Cypriots attending the Kuklia concerts. But in Nicosia, no, our audience is very, very mixed. We have a large Cypriot component, getting larger all the time, actually. I would say at least 50% of our audience, if not more, are Cypriots now.
How far do you think that is due to the master classes that we haven't mentioned yet, that you also do during the festival, and the school outreach programs?
Very important. I mean, I don't think that trickle-on effect, because they're still in their teens, a lot of the students who come to our education program. But I very much believe that in the next years, in the next decade, let's say, a lot of the people who come here as students and benefit from and are enriched by this educational program we've developed will be part of our regular audience in future years. But up to now we've had more than 65,000 school children and students participate in morning concerts, which take place here in the Shoe Factory now. So I think that's a crucial aspect of our work, actually. People see a few hundred people coming to a concert, and they say, well, maybe, however valuable that is, it touches maybe a small minority of the community, although I think it's vital that Cyprus should host artists of this caliber. But I think that really the most significant part of our work is the education aspect. And 65,000 students is no mean figure. It's a very large figure for a small island. I don't know what the entire student body of the island is, but it's a significant proportion of that. So yes, I'm very hopeful that we will have, a decade from now, a new generation of Cypriots who've had some exposure to what we've been doing on the educational side, and will then become part of our regular audience.
Well, those audiences will be gathering, as we said, starting next Thursday. That's the 19th of May. The 16th International Pharos Chamber Music Festival runs through until June the 4th. And you can find out more with details of the artists and the whole programme if you go to www.pharos, that's Pharos, artsfoundation.org.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
How often do you go to an art exhibition and feel that it's, well, rather static? Earlier this week, an exhibition opened in Nicosia that is far from that. A Greek artist with Italian ancestry, Klaudios, invites you to Dialogues with Picasso. I met him as the paintings were being hung and asked him how come it was such a sort of mixed exhibition.
Yeah, sure, because I do it many times with this dialogue with Picasso, and now it's completely one series. I make now 50 pieces with the sculptures together, and when I come a book about these works after 1 month, and I make a dialogue with Picasso very, very often.
So why do you call it Dialogues with Picasso? Because it's not just your dialogues, you want your audience to also have a conversation.
I thought Picasso is there and I can speak with him, and okay, he don't answer, but he hear me.
So he's a big influence on your work?
Yeah, sure, yeah. It's all of my work, the last 35 years, Picasso is always there.
What is it about his work that gives you this feeling that you want to not emulate it, but to have this dialogue?
Yeah, but because Picasso, he lives people, he loves people, he do anything for people, and all of my pictures have some people. And Picasso inspired always, not me, many artists, and it's the last 30 years, I told you, it's just oft, very, very oft, that I work with his work and I do my things inside.
But on this exhibition, you're also going to be at the exhibition yourself to talk to people who come to see the work, and there are going to be other events happening at the same time. Tell us about those.
Yeah. Music, and it's gonna be many things here. I wanna be here every Saturday. If someone want to see me and talk with me, I'm here every Saturday. On Friday maybe, I don't know. But Saturday I'm here. I want to explain to the people that Picasso was he was
unique,
in life. Unique. He's a big artist in 20th century, but it's a little bit difficult to find the 60 years from Picasso and to find a piece which can talk with my idea and with my pieces.
So that's what's going to be fascinating. I think there's also an election going on.
Yeah, sure.
Tell us about that. You're going to ask visitors to vote, I think.
Yeah.
What are they voting for?
Because we have vote in Cyprus next week, and I think we don't take the politicals, we take the artists. If you like some from theater, from music, from contemporary art or something like this, you can say, okay, it's my favorite, and you can vote.
So people can vote for their favourite musicians, artists or anything else, wander around the exhibition and talk to you, and I think you're having a charity auction.
Yeah, we have a charity auction because I give always something back, because I took so much from life and from the people, and sometimes I have to give something back. And the charity is a good idea, and okay, I give a picture, and going to be an auction here, and the money goes for this charity.
Which charity are you supporting?
It's Φωνή του παιδιού, also Φωνή from child.
And that auction is taking place between 7 and 9:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 19th of May. The exhibition by Klaudios, Dialogues with Picasso, runs at the French Institute in Strovolos from the 10th of May to the 25th. And just before I go, a reminder that this Saturday, 14th of May, it's the May Fair at St Paul's Anglican Cathedral in Nicosia in Byron Avenue from 4 till 7 p.m. It's their annual fundraiser, and they asked if I'd give it a mention and chivvy you to go on down there. There's always lots to do, and the kids have fun too. So that's the May Fair at St Paul's, tomorrow, Saturday the 14th of May, from 4 till 7 p.m. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.